I have got such a fun and useful project lined up for you guys today. We'll be making a huge capacity grocery bag, which is double lined and yet small enough to be folded into a pocket. We'll be testing so many skills today: pattern cutting, machine sewing, hand sewing, French seams, sewing around curves, and a lot more. So let's go ahead and get started. So the basis for our fabric grocery bag is a plastic grocery bag, which you can see right here. It's a standard bag, which has got these two handles which are integrated into the body. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut away the seams at the bottom and at the top. So I'm simply going to take a pair of scissors and snip away the bottom seam and then the top two handle seams. Now we can very easily open the bag up and split it all out to actually see how big this bag is. And now, as you can see, when it's laying out flat, it's actually quite wider than it originally looked. So you want to make sure that you're aligning everything on top of each other, so both the handles should be matching with the base layer and the body should make a nice flat rectangle. Now I don't really like this little hump which you can see on the opening of the bag, so I'm going to cut this away. And to do this symmetrically, I'm simply going to fold the bag vertically in half and gently trim away that curved bit so that we are left with a nice, simple, rounded, squared opening. Now watch closely and take a look at this. So here's our bag splayed out. Underneath the bag, I've got two layers of an old white bed sheet. And underneath that, I've got two layers of the outer fabric. The outer fabric is a remnant from an old dressmaking fabric. I'm going to take a pencil, but you can take tailoring chalk as well. And where the curve of the handle is, I'm going to make a line sitting roughly around 1/2 inch beyond the actual edge of the bag. And this is because I'm creating a seam allowance as I create that marking with my pencil. And I'm going to follow that line all the way down the curve of the handle. And then, having done that, I can simply start cutting by cutting about 1 inch above the actual handles of the bag. I'm going to cut straight across the top of the bag. And then, using the tip of my scissors, I'm also going to carefully cut along that pencil line or that curved line that I just drew along one handle side. I'm also going to cut straight across, roughly around 1 inch below the bottom of the bag. I'm cutting through all the 4 layers of fabric. Remember, 2 layers of the lining fabric, which was the old white bed sheet, and 2 layers of the outer fabric. And then moving over to the other side of the bag, I'm going to cut straight vertically up the side of the bag, leaving around 1 inch on either side of the bag. Now I've removed the bag from the top, and I'm also going to remove the top 2 layers of the lining fabric, leaving behind just the top fabric. I'm going to line these fabrics up really accurately and then fold them in half vertically. And in this way, I'm going to follow the curve of the original cut to create the opening for the second handle by simply following the first cut as a template. This makes it really quick and easy. And you guessed it, I'm going to repeat the same for the lining fabric as well. Now for the opening of the bag, I'm going to fold the original plastic bag vertically in half and line it up against the vertical fold on my fabric. And then, following the curve of the opening on the bag, I'm going to cut, leaving around 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Now here's the top layer of the bag all cut out, and I'm going to take off one piece, flip it over so that both the good sides face each other, line up both the handle pieces and the sides really accurately, and then stitch along the handles on the top 2 sides. To do this, I'm using my mini sewing machine as always, and I have threaded it with a black top thread and a white bobbin thread so that when I do show you the stitches, you can see very clearly how everything's going. I am using a reverse kangaroo hop stitch at the beginning and at the end to lock my stitches. If you don't know what that is, please check out the link up here and you'll be able to see very quickly and easily how to do that in order to secure your stitching. And I'm going to repeat the same with the lining fabric as well. I've simply stitched across the top 2 handles, leaving roughly around 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Okay, so let me show you what we are doing here. We had stitched up the handles for both the lining fabric and the top fabric. Here you can see the stitch line and the seams as they were for both the top and the bottom fabrics. What I've now done is basically splayed open the two fabrics and then lined them with the good sides facing each other. And when we do that, this central hole appears where both the U's kind of connected together to make this rectangular hole. And now matching up the hole for both the top fabric and the lining fabric, I have simply clipped all around the hole so that the layers do not shift. And now simply starting at one point, we are going to stitch all around this rectangular hole. So in order to do this, I'm again doing the reverse kangaroo hop stitch at the beginning and at the end to secure my stitching. And I am keeping roughly around 1/2 inch or slightly less of a seam allowance. I'm going to go nice and slow, especially around the curves, until I've gone all the way around. And this is what the stitched result looks like after I have pressed down the seams with a hot steam iron as well. Now see those tight curves there on all 4 corners of this rounded rectangle? I'm going to make little nicks in the fabric running up to the stitch line but never through it, using the tip of a pair of scissors. And this way, when we do turn the fabric over to the other side, we're not going to get any puckering and it's going to stay nice and flat. Okay, so here we are, and I'm going to reach in through that hole and turn one of the fabrics over to the other side through the hole. So here I'm pulling through the lining fabric and I'm going to pull it all the way through over to the other side. And this is what it looks like. See how crisp that rectangle turned out? This is what we're looking for. Now that the hard work is done, I'm simply going to use my mini sewing machine to give the opening a top stitch. So I'm simply going to run the edge of my presser foot along the inner edge of the bag's opening and simply do a straight stitch all the way around as neatly as possible. And this will help to stabilize the project and give it a nice crisp finish as well. Now here's our project all spread out after top stitching. Now to do the sides, we're going to follow something called the burrito method. And to do that, I'm going to start rolling this project from one edge over to the other edge. So I'm going to pick up the edge, all the layers together, so top and the bottom layer. And I'm going to start rolling it into a tight roll. And I'm going to roll it all the way to the opposite edge. And once I reach the opposite edge, I'm going to stop there. And then I'm going to reach over to the opposite edge, split the top and bottom layers apart and bring them around over the burrito roll, and then pin them or clip them together with the good sides facing each other. And I'm going to continue to do this all the way down the length of the project until I've rolled and clipped the entire length of the project. And once everything has been clipped through, this is what our burrito roll looks like. You can see the clips running all the way down the side length of the project. And you guys know the drill by now. I'm going to run the entire length of the project through my mini sewing machine, making sure that I secure the stitches in the beginning and at the end using the reverse kangaroo method or the traditional reverse method. Whichever method you choose to do, just make sure that you do secure your thread so that your stitching or your sewing does not unravel. And once this is done, this is what our burrito looks like. Now I'm going to reach in through the opening and pull it out or turn it right side out. And once I do this, you will see how magically one side of our bag is already stitched and finished. And following this, I repeated the burrito method again to stitch down the length of the other side of the bag. Okay, so now that both the burritos are done, you can see now this is what it looks like. It kind of looks like a tank top with the sides unstitched. Okay, so even though the individual sides are finished up, they're still not stitched together. So for the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to open up this project so that the wrong side faces up, and then on either side where the two pieces are connected and we can see that little horizontal stitch line, over there, we're just going to fold the outward edge towards the inside, roughly around halfway through, like so, so that the stitch lines are sitting neatly on top of each other and both the sides are kind of equal, as equal as we can possibly make them on either side of the opening. And I'm just going to clip this fold down using 2 clips. Now there is a stitch line, as you can see here, and on the other side as well you can see the stitch line. And what we're now going to do is sew a straight stitch across this fold so that this fold stays put and it doesn't go anywhere. So we're going to just run a straight stitch over this fold. And as I sew this, you will notice that I'm pressing down on the presser foot using the tip of a pair of scissors. This is just so I can increase the pressure on my project to make sure that our needle pierces through all the layers and all the threads get caught up in the stitch. You need to do this with a mini sewing machine because it's not strong enough to put a higher amount of pressure on thicker workload. So this works perfectly when you have to sew through multiple layers of fabric. I'm going to go a couple of times back and forth just to lock the stitches. And I repeated the same with the other bag handle as well. After the stitching, this is what the handles look like, as you can see. Now we're going to flip the whole project inside out with the lining side facing outwards, and now we have to sew down the sides of the project. So I'm going to connect the 2 long sides of the bag and then clip them together and sew all the way down the length of the side of the bag, and I'm going to repeat the same on the other side as well. I have used a simple reverse stitch technique which I outlined in the video I showed you earlier to secure my stitches, and as I sew I'm constantly pressing down on the presser foot using my scissors because we're all sewing through multiple layers of fabrics here. You want to make sure that you go nice and slow, and it always helps to either pin or clip your project together as you sew, so that all the layers stay together and they do not shift or move about too much as you sew. Once both sides are done, this is what the project is looking like right now. The stitches came through beautifully because I went nice and slow and I kept on pressing down on the presser foot using my pair of scissors. And now we're going to simply turn the whole project right side out. Now watch this carefully because this is important. This is the original fold that we had done under the handle and then sewn across to fold the handles in. Now if we follow that same fold all the way down, you will realize that the bag can be folded in on either side, and I've just folded it in and pressed it down to create a crease using a hot steam iron. And this is what the bag looks like once those creases are made. Now this is where our French seams come in. We are going to sew all the way across the bottom of the bag, first with the good sides facing outwards. However, because we are using a mini sewing machine, we do have to be careful about one very important thing. Not only are we sewing through multiple layers of fabric in general, but also where those side seams are hidden away, tucked inside, that is actually a very thick wad of fabrics right there, multiple layers, and our mini sewing machine simply just cannot sew through those multiple layers. So just where that very thick side seam sits, we are going to hand sew, and the rest of it we will sew using a mini sewing machine in 3 little breaks. Okay, so here we are. I've clipped the bottom edge of the bag closed using some clips, and here's that really thick layer of fabrics where the side seams run, and I'm simply going to sew over that spot using a needle and a thread. So I've knotted my thread, as you can see, and I used the granny's fingers method as outlined in this video. And I'm simply going to take a few minutes to just sew over both the places where these thick seams run using a simple back and forth stitch, kind of like a back stitch. Stitching the remaining bottom edge was fairly simple, and once it's done, this is what it looks like. Now I take a sharp pair of scissors and trim down the seams as close as possible to the stitch line. This will make it far more easier and neater when we turn the bag wrong side out and give it one final stitch, which is going to be finally our French seams. So next I simply turn the whole bag inside out and poked both the corners out into nice sharp pointy corners. Right, so here we are. I've turned the whole project inside out and given it a good press, and now I'm going to sew a straight stitch all along the bottom of the bag, but we're going to do it again in 3 pieces or 3 parts, leaving out these 2 parts where I'll be hand stitching because those are really thick seams. Okay, let's do this. So here we are at our mini sewing machine again, and for this initial first part of sewing, as well as for the last part of the sewing, I will be pressing down on my presser foot using a pair of scissors. And for the middle length, I don't need to press down because we're just sewing through 4 layers of fabric, and our mini sewing machine can cope quite well with 4 layers of fabric. Every time I want to skip over that really thick section of the side seams which are folded over, I'm simply going to pull out a little more thread from the top reel and then lift the presser foot and jump forward so that I can just continue to sew without snipping any threads just yet. And I'll snip away all the extra threads right at the very end of the project. I wanted to quickly zoom in and show you guys what the finished stitching looks like. So this is all the machine sewing. As you can see, it came through beautifully, no skip stitches. Front and back, and then here where that really thick seam was, I did a few quick back and forth hand stitches just to secure those thick seams. And then as you continue along, you can see that the stitches came through beautifully again, and this is where we jumped over those thick layers of fabric, and I did a quick hand stitched seam there. And then we moved on further with our mini sewing machine, and in this way our front seams are completed. Now I'm going to turn the whole bag right side out, give it a quick press, and show you what it looks like. And here we are with the finished bag. As you can see, it came through beautifully well. After stitching all the seams down, you can see that the finished product looks really pretty and really well finished. It has loads of capacity, and because we upcycled an old white bed sheet for the inner liner, it means that we can see the contents of the bag very easily. And with our front seams and the burrito roll technique along the sides, you can see that the inner seams are very neatly finished with no raw edges anywhere. I'm going to put in some groceries and show you how big the bag is. And so here we are with a bag full of groceries. I managed to empty out almost half my pantry into this bag, and there was still some more space left within. And this made for a really heavy bag indeed. So you can see it's got huge capacity. You can carry so much in there. And very comfortably as well, because the handles, because they're part of the fabric, they don't dig into your skin or your hand at all. I do hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. It was a bit longer, and it was something that some of you had requested me to do, to film a more detailed, longer tutorial. So I do hope you enjoyed it and that you will try making a grocery bag like this one, no matter what type of sewing machine you have at home. If you did find this video helpful or inspiring or fun in any way, please do give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and more importantly, do comment down below to let me know how you found this video today. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I know I've been away for a while, but I am hoping to put out lots more content for you guys. I shall see you very soon. Have a lovely week. Take care. Bye.